Welcome to the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. I am very excited to continue this series on the stages of growth and the emotional intelligence competencies required for that stage. And we've talked about stage one when you're just starting out. We've talked about stage two, and now we are in stage three, which is the delegation stage. And there are four main competencies required in this stage: teamwork, emotional self-awareness, achievement orientation, and conflict management. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and give those definitions real quick, Raj, and then we'll jump right in. I got some questions for you today.
Sure.
So as we look at these competencies, the first one is emotional self-awareness. We've talked about this before, but it's recognizing and understanding one's own emotions. And then we have achievement orientation, which is striving for personal and professional improvement, which you probably already have if you're an entrepreneur. Then we've got a couple that you may not have just based on your experience and background. But the first one is conflict management, which is resolving disagreements and conflicts in a constructive manner. Don't let me forget, Raj, I do have a 3-step process that I teach on this. I'll bring it up later.
Sure.
And
great.
then it actually, I'll save it for later. And then the final one is teamwork, which is working effectively with others to achieve a common goal. So with that in mind, we're talking about stage three. So we've got anywhere from 24 to 30 employees at this stage?
20 to 34. Anywhere from
20 to 34 employees at this stage.
Yes.
Okay. So let's jump right in. The headline of this stage is delegation. That's the key word in this stage that you've highlighted. So what are some practical strategies for entrepreneurs to effectively delegate responsibilities during that delegation stage?
So if you go back and look at the stages of growth, this is a critical phase for the entrepreneur. This is the last stage for an entrepreneur-led company. Until now, everything has been focused on the entrepreneur. So they go back and run the company the way like an entrepreneur runs their company. But the next stage, stage 4, is what we call a professional organization, where it becomes enterprise-centric and moving away from the ownership. And that's the reason why developing the team with the right expertise, with the right skill sets, and giving the responsibilities to them is very essential before they become a stage 4 company. That's very, very critical there. So I just wanted to go back and highlight that piece of it. And the mindset is you're moving away from an entrepreneur-centric company to an enterprise-centric company.
That's so good to explain that, because the great Stephen Covey taught us you got to begin with the end in mind, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And if you're going on this journey, each one of these stages are purposeful, and they build competencies for the stage and for the stages to come. And so you said delegation now because we're moving more into an enterprise organization. That's ultimately where we're trying to go. Yes. And so you, as the entrepreneur, you need to think long and hard about where it is you're trying to go with your organization. How big do you want to get? How many employees do you want to have? And are you taking the steps now? Because everything, it's like cooking a meal, right? If you're cooking, sauteing up some vegetables, well, you want to get your rice started first, because that takes a little bit of time to cook, and you want it ready when those vegetables are ready to go. And so there's stages, there's a process to doing this. I'm saying that because we had rice and vegetables yesterday, so it's top of mind. But and I didn't do it right, and so I was waiting on rice.
Okay.
But anyways. So what is that process? What are some strategies? Do you have any tools or ways that you teach your clients to properly delegate?
So one of the biggest tool I have been using for at least now 30 plus years is called GRIPI, GRPI. And the first thing in this stage is, because of delegation, the key piece of it is goals. What are the goals we are trying to accomplish? They can be, we start always with the annual goals first, and then break them into quarterly and monthly, depending on the business. They can be different goals. So first piece of it is clarity around the goals. The second piece of it is clarity around the roles. So each one of them, what is the role they are playing, and who is accountable for which goal and what measurement.
That's so good. That's the by who, by when, right?
Exactly there. And the third, we need to go back and create the processes. You were talking about conflict management. You were talking about some of the other pieces of it. So you need to create a processes. How do we start making decisions? How are we going to go back and resolve issues? And the fourth, which is the most important piece of it, is called interpersonal skills. Are we having the emotional intelligence to go back and work with different people? Now, when we are 8 to 10 people, and we go back and we always try to hire people who are very similar to us. But now when you are in 30 people, 25 people, we have to hire for their skill set also. So now people are coming and you have a lot of different people with different ways of looking at things. So the interpersonal skills become very, very important. So if you look at the leadership team and who you're delegating it, if you implement the Grippy tool, then it becomes much more easier to manage because everybody knows what is expected. Everybody knows their role and how much they are accountable for accomplishing those goals. And then you have processes for handling crises and situations and how we are working with each other, interpersonal skills. So the Grippy tool, I would say, is one of the most important thing in this stage from a delegation perspective.
That's so good, because I think often the process piece that you mentioned, so often you, myself, we get called into an organization to do some conflict management, some coaching to help people work through stuff. And there are so many self-inflicted wounds in organizations, right? People don't put the foresight into to think about how a decision here might affect somebody over there. It causes a conflict, it causes a frustration where you could create a process on the front end where everybody would know what the other person is doing, and it can avoid so many interpersonal disputes within an organization. And so that's a key factor that I think a lot of small businesses, a lot of small companies, a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about when they're building their organization.
Yes. And Drew, even if you go back and look at it, a lot of entrepreneur companies, they get to this 20 to 30 and they're stuck there for ages to come.
Yeah.
I personally, in the last 15 years, might have seen at least between 80 and 100 companies like that. And the biggest reason what it is, they could not delegate it, and they really could not get themselves away from being an entrepreneur. And that's the reason why now they're stuck there, and more from an entrepreneurship, it becomes a job for them.
Yeah.
And they're stuck in that, it becomes a job and a routine, and they spend their lives 20, 30, 40 years and say, hey, what did I spend my whole life around?
Yeah.
And that is what you will see almost like 60, 70% of the people who have not taken the time to understand and change.
That's so good. That goes back to, the quote you gave, learn, unlearn, relearn. We've got to constantly be in that cycle as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as just people. I think it's a great thing as a parent to learn, unlearn, relearn, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
And continue to reflect upon your experiences and say, what can I change about myself? If something that you're doing is not working, change your philosophy, go and explore some other ways of doing things and try it out. And I think that's so powerful in this process. What got you there, what got you here won't get you there, right?
Exactly.
And so there's so many different ways to say it. It's true. And it's a fact of life for entrepreneurs. And then you just said in your own experience that that it's true. So great. I love that Grippy concept, that idea, that process. It covers so many things. I don't know, how do you categorize it? Is it a goal setting technique? Is it a problem solving technique? How does that Grippy categorize? It just seems great across the board just to think through in making decisions.
I mean, how does it matter what we classify? Just use the tool, right? I tell people the same thing because that's a question. For me, what I call it is basically it is a great communication tool. That's what I tell people.
Okay.
Because there you're really saying somebody has got the goals built in. If you are an entrepreneur, you already know, hey, this year I need to make X number of dollars. This is what I need to keep my budget at. This is what. So they're already thinking about some of those things.
Yeah.
But if they don't communicate, and this is what the Grippy tool will focus is, okay, you're delegating and you have a 6-member team. Okay, what are you responsible for? So now you say, hey, these are the 6 goals we need to accomplish. Each one of us is responsible for one goal.
Yeah.
So for me, at the top of the line, it is pretty much a communication tool, holding people accountable for, and creating that heightened awareness around that.
I love it. I love it. Covers so many things. That's great. Okay, so we talked about delegation. Now we're getting into some stuff that I'm not very comfortable with.
Okay.
We're talking about implementing advanced financial reporting and projection systems. I'm married to an accountant. This is where she lives. This is her world. I count on her to do all that stuff. But what are some key benefits of implementing an advanced financial reporting and projection system during this delegation stage?
So if you go back and really look at a stage 3, you have almost 20 to 34 employees, right?
Mhm.
So technically, your business is really helping 20 to 30 families.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of financial piece of it is riding on everybody's future.
Yeah.
Unless you're born with the golden spoon and you have unlimited funds, which is 0.0001% of the population.
Exactly.
The rest of us, we need to really look at it, measure, monitor, and really plan around all of those things. And that's the reason why. And remember, I told you from stage 3, you're going into stage 4, which is becoming an enterprise-centric company. So when you're going into that stage, you really need those systems around all of your financial practices. So what I tell people is the first thing is get some sort of a software to manage all of those things.
Mhm.
The most common thing we have seen is QuickBooks, but right now you have multitude of SaaS programs that you can use.
Yeah.
But that is the first piece of it. And what I always tell all of my clients is look at least these 5 different aspects of it. Make sure you're on top of your account receivable. Create a process around your account receivable. Are we billing the client at the right time? Are we getting the money at the right time? The second piece of it, are we paying our clients, our vendors at the right time? Either or can break our company.
Mm-hmm.
If we are not smart about account receivable, then basically we are not getting our money in time. So we are wasting a lot of funds and somebody else is getting the value out of it.
Yeah.
If we are not paying to our vendors, then we don't get the same support and then we might delay in providing our services and stuff.
Yeah.
And the third one, which is very much delegation, is you come up with a budget. You come up with a plan, what we call a profit plan or a cash flow plan. People use different names for it. But there is a budget you're setting, and now everybody knows what they can use. How do they spend it? So the accountability is huge there.
Well, and with that, if you ever plan on exiting the company, all of that information and the years of properly accounting for everything is going to pay literally in that process. So we're talking about emotional intelligence. How can emotional intelligence or emotional self-awareness contribute to understanding financial health? Does it factor in these stages?
Oh, it factors a lot. Because each person's, we already know that emotional awareness is very different, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you one example which happened like 3 weeks ago. Basically, this is a small company and stuff, and they have the HR person, basically, who is kind of the senior delegated person, one of the senior leaders among the 6 people in the company. Mm-hmm. So the financial results were declared and they were really having a tough time with some of the financial. They could not get the funding they expected. So they really had, and they were burning cash so much that they had enough cash for 6 months. Mm. And this HR person was so fragile when she heard about this. And she said, hey, I'm the breadwinner. And she was all so nervous that she went to the CEO and she literally cried and said, what is going to happen? Mm-hmm. So this is, I'm giving you a worst case scenario of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is where the emotional intelligence comes, because for her, she took it so personally and she could not really regulate her emotions because she was putting too much into that. Fortunately, the leader of the business, achievement orientation, high emotional self-awareness, basically the entrepreneur really knew how to sit with her, communicate with her, calm her down and say, hey, this is one aspect of the financial piece of it. Mm-hmm. You are not aware of what we are doing with plan B and plan C and plan D and stuff. So that is one example. You don't want somebody to be really, really rattled with the bad news or too excited with basically the positive news. So I know a couple of entrepreneurs, they saw the numbers, everything was great. They went back and bought a Maserati spending $150,000. And then 3 months later, they were in trouble because they didn't have money and they had to sell the Maserati to go back and pay the bills.
Wow.
So either or, but the financial position at least will go back and give you that. And the emotional intelligence piece of it will help you to go back and really use the information very well and manage the business very well.
Yeah. That's good. I was told once that all purchases are emotional, and then we rationalize them afterwards. And so
Exactly.
it's the same thing, right? You get a windfall of money, and you make an emotional decision, maybe not a rational one, but if you have that self-awareness, you can understand what you're doing and determine if it's the best decision in that moment.
Yeah.
So
For
that's great.
entrepreneurs, especially like the startups where they're getting external funding, one of the most important thing I always tell people is, what is your burn rate? How much cash are you burning, and how many months of cash do you have?
That's good.
So right
That's
now,
good.
I know at least 4 companies. If you look at the outside, they're very, very successful. They're growing very fast and everything else. But when I went and checked their numbers, basically somebody has 3 months of cash and somebody has 5 months of cash, and they don't
Wow.
have anybody else.
A little scary.
Very scary. But at least they know where to focus on right now.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is what the whole piece of it. In the delegation stage, when you have 30, 40 members, it is not like you can pull your personal checkbook. If it was 5 people or 10 people, maybe you had some personal cash, you would go back and say, hey, let me borrow from my personal funds and pay them this month.
Yeah.
You see a lot of entrepreneurs while scaling their business do that.
Mm.
But when you are 25, 30 employees, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And in this kind of a VUCA environment, the banks are not going to give you money that easy.
Yeah, we're hearing that every day, that tightening on lending and small businesses are struggling to get lines of credit. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're always operating a little bit behind, then that creates a very scary scenario for a small organization.
Exactly. And that's the reason why the EQ piece of it, the way I go summarize it is, you want the people and their emotional intelligence in a way that they respond rather than react to things.
That's good.
So some people, when they react, what I get is, it is almost like the sky is falling mindset when something negative comes.
Yeah.
So I want everybody to be comfortable from that point.
Yeah. So when we talk about kind of this responsibility, emotional intelligence for the team, how can an entrepreneur use emotional intelligence to really motivate and inspire employees to take ownership of their forecasts and be accountable for their projections? Because that's huge in that environment that picture you just painted. You really want your team, and I hear it over and over and over again, I wish my team would take ownership. I wish they would have a business owner's mindset and all this, that, and the other. How can a business owner use emotional intelligence to help their team take ownership of those projections and be accountable?
Because I have seen 2 sets of entrepreneurs and ownership in this.
Okay.
There are some people who are very good in delegation, but they have not trained and really got the people with the right skill set in their position, and they struggle.
Mm.
And there are some people, they hire pretty smart people, but they have never delegated enough power or given them the freedom to go back and execute. So what I caution all this entrepreneur is, please don't fall into one of those categories. Be a hybrid of the two. Go back and identify with the right potential, and then slowly start releasing basically delegating things to them. Yeah, if you want to handhold them for a few months, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Either or is going to be really, really troublesome for it. You'll start losing people, then we know you hired smart people, but basically you have not delegated.
Yeah.
And to your question, you said basically, if you really are not getting the work done and people are not accountable, then either they were not given the authority, or they were not communicated, or they don't have the skill set.
Yeah. That's good. And I've found that people sometimes fail to delegate because their identity is wrapped up in that role. So you might have the entrepreneur salesperson that they don't want to move, just like you talked about. They can limit their organization's growth because they don't want to transition into that delegation piece and bring on a salesperson that can help with the sales. And so they never release it because their identity, the emotional intelligence, right? They're not self-aware and recognizing that their identity, like who they see themselves as, is as a rainmaker. I've always been great in sales. That's what I do. Okay. Well, you're one person, so you can only make so many sales. And I think in that delegation process, what I challenge folks to do in my leadership trainings is, make a list of the things that you can delegate. And a question you might ask yourself is, what are the only things that I can do? What are the only things that I can do? And that list is probably going to be shorter than you think. And then everything else that you do, get that list. You might not have the person today that, like you said, has the skill sets to do that, but you have the list. And so now your eyes are open to, I wonder where I could delegate this. I wonder who is hungry and wants to learn how to do this, and it would help them in their career progression as they grow. So I think that's self-awareness. It's being understanding what your skill sets are, and maybe even recognizing the achievement orientation of others on your team.
Yes. And Drew, you bring up a very good point. In fact, I was talking on Friday to one of my potential clients, and I challenged him. He said, Raj, I can double my business tomorrow. I'm a great rainmaker, just like you said. I said, that is great. Then when are you hiring your CEO to run your business so that you can be the rainmaker?
Yeah.
I said, you can't do both. Remember, you have to manage your company. Now, basically, they were getting into stage 3, 23 employees now. They just got into the delegation stage. And I said,
okay,
can you do everything that is required for the job? Exactly like you're saying. Hey, if you look at the list. And he said, Raj, I can't do it. And if I do it, I don't have time. Exactly. So either you go back and delegate the sales piece of it, or you become the salespeople, but you get somebody else to work the operations and do it. You decide where is your critical strength and where is the biggest value add.
That's good.
And that is a question these people constantly have to have. And that is where basically the higher self-awareness really becomes very, very important.
Yeah, that is fantastic. That's a great illustration, because it makes the point that you as an entrepreneur are in the driver's seat. You get to choose which seat you sit in, and it doesn't have to be just the CEO. You know, you can have somebody else do that and do the sales. That's fantastic. So how can emotional self-awareness help entrepreneurs identify areas of improvement in their current business model? You've talked a lot about redesigning and preparing for that enterprise. It seems like a very transitional stage, this
Yes.
delegation stage. So how can self-awareness help you, challenge those current business models? What techniques can be used to successfully redesign your model?
So here, if you go back and look at it, one of the biggest thing why we talk about the financial piece of it, right? So the big part of it is to understand your costs and profitability. So if you look at a company, when we are 5 people or 8 people or 10 people, our overhead is much lower. So we go back and price our products accordingly. And if you still continue the same thing, the overhead has significantly increased with 20, 30 people, bigger office, bigger space, basically more number of paychecks to be given every week or every other week, whatever your cycle is. But if you have not looked at your business model and redesigned your profitability and business model, what is happening is your price is consistent, but your profitability is going down because your expenses are mounting. So what happens is eventually you might be in a bottleneck where you don't have enough cash to grow the business. Because if there is no profitability, you can't grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is where the biggest piece of it. That's the reason why this stage, the financial piece of it becomes very important. And the emotional piece of it is, are you looking at it emotionally? Are you looking at it objective? When you're looking at financial and stuff like that, you need to have the heightened self-awareness to go back and look at it objective. So where is it that I'm spending money? What would happen to my client? Will my client be afforded if I go back and say, I increase my price by 10% or 20%, whatever business they are. So all of that has to happen. And that comes with your one, business acumen, entrepreneurship. Second, that heightened self-awareness piece of it.
Yeah.
And second piece of it is, if they're too emotional about it, or if they're not very comfortable with the financial side of it, they need to go back and bring in the right person and delegate that piece of it. So this is where I go back and say, hey, if you don't, if you might have an accounting person, you can have somebody like a senior accountant or a senior person with financial knowledge, but you might go back and get a fractional CFO or somebody like a treasurer or somebody with a little bit more higher caliber with higher experience who can go back and look at it and help you navigate that piece of it.
Yeah. Bring it. So that really brings the self-awareness piece of teamwork, right?
Exactly.
Getting other people rallied around this common goal, casting that vision, continuing to cast the vision for the organization. The one thing we haven't discussed yet, as far as the emotional intelligence competencies, is that conflict. And I tell my clients all the time, I say there's three options. If you're in conflict at work, you have three options. You can address the issue that you're having with a person. You can get over it. You can decide, you know what, this happened once, or this isn't worth getting frustrated about. It's a preference, whatever the case is, you can get over it, or you can quit. Well, an entrepreneur only has two. So unless they're going to sell the company, they can address the conflict or they can get over it. What are some strategies for conflict resolution, or what are some common conflicts you've seen in this stage 3 of growth?
So the biggest piece of it is the people who have been with the entrepreneur since stage 1 versus the people who have come. So I'll take the same example of, let us say we brought in a fractional CFO or somebody with that kind of a capability to help them with the financial.
Yeah.
So this person is being brought in because of their financial expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And one example I'll give you is one of my clients a few years ago bought somebody like this. And every time he makes a big decision, he refers to him and say, hey, do you think we have the money for it? Because he has taken the position very seriously.
Yeah.
And then two of his vice presidents would get really mad because earlier they used to talk to the entrepreneur. He would say, just make it happen and write a check.
Yeah.
And now it is going to a person who has been with them for less than a year or two, telling them, hey, we don't have the cash for it.
Yeah.
And how are you bringing the cash? Or they're holding them accountable, say, hey, you're saying that it will take us 12 months. What can we do to get some revenue numbers up in 6 months? Because that is too high risk and we might run out of cash.
Mm.
And that is where one of the conflicts come is, I have been here much longer than you. I know this business. I built it with my hands. We laid the first brick kind of an attitude to, why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why that might be one side of conflict piece of it.
Yeah, I've even heard of when you're starting out, you know, the people that are with you in those early stages, and it's not, we're talking about people, so I get it. I don't want people to get upset or offended by me saying this, but those early people referred to as scaffolding, right? Just like building a building, there's the scaffolding, there's the people that help you kind of build out this exterior, but those aren't necessarily going to be the same skill sets and the same type of person. And that type of person might not want to be part of an enterprise organization. They might love the start out phase and they want to be in stage 1 companies, and they're going to leave and they're going to go to a different stage 1. If they feel like they need to go, or they're showing you who they are, right? They're showing you through their actions, through their attitude. Maybe their attitude is great in stage 1, but it's not good now as we're in stage 3, stage 4. Then take them at their word, you know, and remember the times that you had together starting it out, but let them go on to the next startup and you continue to build up your organization. And that's the tough thing. That's with the emotional intelligence, where you go, oh my goodness, you know, you can get so attached to a time, a situation, a stage of growth in your organization. But if ultimately the goal is to get up to 500 employees or whatever the case is, the people that got you there aren't necessarily the same people that can get you to where you want to go.
Andrew, you bring up such an important point, and I go back to mine: learn, unlearn, relearn.
Yeah,
that happens. And in stage 3 and stage 4, you can expect 10 to 20% of your population leaving the organization. That is a planning. And that is the reason why the delegation becomes so important, because you can go back and say, will this person be able to go back and change and take on new responsibilities? Will this person can go back and change the role and the way they look at the business, the way they look at the processes, the way they look at the profitability? Because stage 3 and stage 4 is going to be one of the critical pieces where a lot of businesses go through massive change. And if you start delegating people and identifying people, then you're not going to lose that institutional knowledge, which was here at stage 1 and stage 2, and they're walking the door and you lose that knowledge away. And that's the reason why you bring in the delegation piece of it. So 3 and 4, 10, 20%, 30%, if you're losing people, and that is okay. Because as long as you capture the knowledge and you're developing the next level of people.
Yeah, that's good. So any entrepreneur out there, brush up on your conflict management skills, or better yet, go through Raj's next training. Do you have an open enrollment at this time, or when's the next time you're doing an open course over these stages of growth that you do for entrepreneurs?
So the next one is September last week, the fourth week of September. I think it is the fourth Thursday of the month. I don't have the exact date, but it is September last week. We have the next cohort. We're looking for 15 small business owners, entrepreneurs in stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4 to join. It'll be a very, very exciting journey there.
Okay. And where can folks find that information?
So they can go to vrt9.com/basically EGA.
Okay. Entrepreneur Growth Alliance is what the EGA stands for. And we'll have it in the show notes as well with a link there. But on this front, so stage 3, delegation, we talked about teamwork, we talked about conflict management, we talked about achievement orientation and emotional self-awareness. Anything else you want to close out this episode with, Raj?
So the biggest piece, like we said, I just want to summarize what we already spoke. One is the business model, to make sure we are still profitable and redesign the business model. And that can only happen if you have the financial systems in place. Now you see the correlation, right? Once those two there, so you're making data-based decision rather than emotion-based decisions.
Yeah.
And based on that, you're delegating it to the right people with the right information, with the right data, so that the team can move forward. And as a team, you can scale it up to the next one, which would be an enterprise-focused stage 4 company.
This is getting so exciting. I mean, I feel like I'm on the journey right now. And I've gotten to go in and see companies at different stages, and everything that you bring up is so relevant to organizations that I've worked with. And I wish that I would have had this information then, so that I could communicate to them different ways and techniques of preparing for what's ahead. It's predictable, people are predictable, and that's what these stages are all about. It's about how many employees you have. And at these various stages, there needs to be different levels of organization and different focus areas in preparation for the next stage of growth. And so this was fantastic. Next week, we're going to talk about stage 4. And how many employees is stage 4? It's going to be 35 to
54.
54. Wow, that's a big group, a big change. And we're moving into enterprise. This has been fantastic, Raj. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. And if you want to get a hold of Raj, the information, the links will be in the show notes.
Yes.
And thank you so much for listening to the Raj and Drew Show for entrepreneurs. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Drew. It was fantastic, and getting very excited to share more information on stage 4, because it's a big shift for everybody.